Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered how basically empires rise, they shape entire civilizations, okay, uh, and then eventually fade away? Okay, today we are gonna dive deep into one of history's most compelling sagas, the story of India from the arrival of the Mughals through the rise of Marathas and then to the dawn of modern era. Okay, we'll also uncover how we know what we know, the different sources of history. We'll try to explore the dazzling heights of the empire and try to dissect the complex reason for its decline. Okay, now get ready for a journey through centuries of power, culture, and transformation. Okay, now how do historians basically reconstruct this vibrant past? How do we know all this history? It's like a detective work. For the mighty Mughal Empire, we literally had the literary sources, okay, like say think personal diaries like the Baburnama, where Emperor Babur himself gives candid insights into his life, his ambitions, and even his observations on Indian flora and fauna. Then we also have the official court chronicles, uh, Abul Fazl's Akbarnama. Okay, they are like treasure troves which detail Akbar's rule and the empire's administration down to the last detail. We also have accounts from European travelers, okay, like Bernier, Tavernier, Manushi, okay, offering their perspective, outsiders' perspective through some, sometimes it is biased, but we also got details from foreign travelers. Okay, now not only texts, we also have archaeological sources. They speak volume. The breathtaking monuments, for example, the Humayun's tomb, Fatehpur Sikri, the Red Fort, and of course, Taj Mahal. Okay, they basically showcase architectural genius and imperial ideology. Then, of course, the coins. They tells us about the economy, the rulers, and the extent of empire. Inscriptions of buildings, and the further layers of information also we get it through the coins. Now this is how we got information, details about the history of Mughals. Now let's also understand how we got details, how the historians got the details of Marathas. Now to understand the Marathas, who basically emerged as a more major force, we basically turned the historians, when I'm speaking about we, it's basically the historians turn to different sources like the Bakhars, which are Marathi historical narratives, okay, often chronicling heroic deeds, often mentioning the heroic deeds, and of course sometimes it was biased, okay, but that was taken as one of the major source of the Maratha history. Then crucially, the Peshwa Daftar. Now they were administrative records. They are Pune archives. Okay, they hold vast archives of administrative and diplomatic reports from the Marathas Confederacy peak. Okay, letters were also exchanged between rulers and commanders. Then accounts from foreigners like the Portuguese, the Dutch, the English observers, and of course the Marathi literature. They all contribute to painting the picture of their rise, their governance, alongside imposing physical presence of their forts. During Marathas also there were major forts. Okay, now let us come closer to the modern India. How historians today we are writing the history. What are the sources of history for modern India? Now during modern India, the sources actually multiplied exponentially. Today we have mountains of archival materials. The British government records, documents from princely states, the Post-Indian National Archives, the private papers of key individuals, newspapers, periodicals from the different times, from contemporary viewpoints as well as from debates. Okay, then also oral history. Now oral history, they basically capture personal recollections, like what, my Nanaji, my Dadaji, my grandfather, my grandmother, they have basically gone through that freedom fighting. These oral recordings, oral history will also form a part of the sources. Then apart from these, the biggest ones are photographs, films. Now these recordings basically they bring the era to the life. Okay. Now these things are basically about the sources of the Mughal era, the Marathas, and the modern India. Now let's actually set the stage now about the Mughal period. Now India in the early 16th century, it wasn't a single entity. Okay, it was not one entity. The Delhi Sultanate under the Lodi dynasty was basically weak and crumbling. The powerful Rajput kingdoms led by figures like Rana Sanga of Mewar formed a strong confederacy in the northwest. Okay, confederacy is a term which we use for kingdom. They formed a strong kingdom or a confederacy in the northwest. Now regional sultanates like the Gujarat, the Malwa, the Bengal, they also held sway, while the Vijayanagar Empire dominated the south during the 16th century. Okay, it was into this fragmented landscape that Babur, Zahiruddin Muhammad Babur, that's his full name. Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, okay, who had basically lost his ancestral kingdom in Central Asia, he turned his ambitions. He came to India. Okay, now in 1526, at the first battle of Panipat, Babur basically faced the Sultan Ibrahim Lodi. Okay, the first battle of Babur was the first battle of Panipat. Battle of Panipat in 1526. It was between Babur and Ibrahim Lodi. Okay, now Babur's innovative use of gunpowder, artillery, and cavalry proved very decisive, very important against Lodi's larger and more traditional army. Now Lodi has a very traditional army. Lodi was not updated with regards to technicalities in war. Okay, but Babur, he majorly used the gunpowder artillery and the cavalry tactics. Okay, now this victory, the 1526 victory, gave Babur control of Delhi and Agra. Battle of Panipat, the first battle of Panipat, 1526, gave Babur control of Delhi and Agra. But the fight wasn't over. Okay, he also confronted the formidable Rajput Confederacy. Now, Rajput Confederacy was under Rana Saga. Rana Sanga was the king there, for Rajput Confederacy. Now, in 1527, Babur also fought a war with Rana Sanga. Okay, it was called Battle of Khanwa. Okay, this was a tougher battle for Babur. Okay, but Babur's basically the generalship and artillery. Basically, Babur was using artillery that carried the day. That gave him a decisive break, and then it basically broke Rajput power in North India. And this basically 1527, the Battle of Kanwa, it laid the foundation of Mughal rule. Okay, 1526 was first Battle of Panipat between Babur and Lodi, where Babur won. He got power of Delhi and Agra. Then in next year 1527, it was Battle of Khanwa between Babur and Rana Sanga. Okay, and then it started where Babur won, and this started the consolidation of Mughal power in North India. Okay, now unfortunately enough, Babur's rule was only for 4 years. Okay, Babur died in 1530. But in these 4 years, Babur basically spent a lot of his time consolidating new territories, acquiring new territories, doing wars and getting new territories in his own kingdom in 4 years. Okay. Now let's go to the administration part. Okay. Now that this was basically about the entry of Mughal, how Mughal entered, Babur entered, okay, took charge of Delhi and Agra first, then entered into the North India from Battle of Kanwa. Okay, now let's understand how basically Mughals managed to govern such a vast and diverse empire for centuries. Okay, so let's try to understand the administration system during Mughal period. Okay, now at the apex was the emperor. He was seen like the ultimate absolute authority, the ultimate authority. He was considered as the source of all power. Okay, the emperor even was considered as God's representative on earth. That is the reason that during those times, emperors, we used to call emperors Jile Ilahi. Jile Ilahi is God's representative on earth. Okay, now emperor was being assisted by different ministers, key ministers. Now these key ministers were, the first one was the Vakil. Okay, initially the prime minister, but later more ceremonial. Initially Vakil was more important, more powerful, but later on his power diminished. Okay, the second one was Divanikul or Wazir. Okay, now after Vakil, Wazir was the most important person, but gradually Wazir became more important in the later period. Now Wazir was the powerhouse. He was either called the Wazir or Divanikul. He was the powerhouse. He was the head of revenue and finance, and he was basically overseeing income, expenditure and land grants. Now later on you will understand land grants were played very major role during Mughal Empire for their revenues. Okay, and then after Wazir, the next one was Mir Bakshi. Now Mir Bakshi basically was the head of military department. Now these were the different key ministers during Mughal period. Okay, Mir Bakshi was the head of military department. He was responsible for recruitment, salaries, intelligence gathering and military organization. Okay, Mir Bakshi was head of military department. Okay, next was Mir Saman. Mir Saman basically was in charge of imperial household. Imperial household means royal palace. Mir Saman, he was in charge of the imperial household, which includes the royal workshops or karkhanas, which produced luxury goods. Okay, karkhanas was also a major revenue source for Mughal Empire. Okay, now after Mir Saman, it is Sadr Sudar, head of religious affair. Okay, Sadr Sudar, they were basically head of the religious affairs, charities and the judiciaries. They also appointed qazis or judges. Okay, apart from this, there were other important officials as well. Okay, now this was basically the framework, the central administration framework of Mughal Empire, the Mughal period. Now let's actually understand how basically the provincials and the structure, localities were structured, how they governed using different provinces. Okay, this central structure was basically mirrored in the provinces. The empire was divided into first Subas, which was like provinces. They were governed by Subedar. Subedar was like governor or the Nizam. He was responsible for overall administration and law and order. Okay, but most importantly, each Suba also had a provincial Diwan. Subedar or Suba province, each province has an Diwan as well. Subedar is a governor, then Diwan. Diwan was the provincial financial head. He was responsible for revenue, who also reported directly to the central Diwan. Okay, they were intelligent enough, for each Suba they had a Diwan, but they also had a central Diwan. on the main head of all these Diwans was a central Diwan. So every Diwan used to report to central Diwan. This was basically made for checks and balance to avoid basically the governors from becoming way more powerful. Now Diwan basically the Diwan's job was collecting revenues and all that stuff. If any Diwan, any Suba was collecting more revenue, there was a chance that they become more powerful than other Subas and revolt. So that was the reason to avoid that they had these Diwans to report directly to the central Diwan. Okay. Now provinces were further divided into sarkars. Sarkars were districts. Now they were managed by fauzdars. Now fauzdars were military command and police. Okay, and amalguzar. Sarkars, which were districts, they were basically headed by fauzdar. Fauzdar used to take care of military or police command, and amalguzar. Amalguzar basically were into revenue collection. And then sub-district, parganas. Parganas, they had officials like Shikdar and Amin. Shikdar again used to take care of law and order, and Amin again used to take care of revenue. And also they had this one, Kwanunga. Kwanunga used to take care of land records. Okay. Now again, let us just take it again. Subas is province. Now Subas had Subedar, Diwan, okay, yeah, and Bakhars, who were basically provincial military head. That was about Subas. Then below Subas they had sarkars. Sarkars is a district. Now district was headed by fauzdar and amalguzar, right? And then these districts were again divided by sub districts, which were like parganas. Parganas had Shikdar, Amin and Kwanungo. Now below these, they had villages, the basic unit. Now these remained the basic units with its own headman, which is Mukaddam, and accountant, Patwari. Okay, now these were villages there. Now underpinning all this entire structure was basically a Mansabdari system. Mansabdari system is a ranking system. Okay, this was a unique system where every high official, civil and military, they were given a rank or a mansab. And this rank basically determined their status, their salary and the number of cavalrymen, the savars, they were required to maintain for the empire. Okay, and salaries basically were often paid through land assignments called jagirs. Okay, while brilliantly the system worked, but later on this also contributed to the fall of Mughal Empire. Okay, because what happened was, later on you will understand, Jagir is basically land. Jagir is land development, land. Okay, as the major land source decreased, land revenues decreased because of Jagirdari system. Okay, it also contributed to fall of Mughal Empire. Okay, but try to understand the Mansabdari system. Mansabdari system was a unique system, where every high official, civil and military, was given a rank or a mansab. He was called either a mansab. Okay, now this rank, it used to determine their status, also their salary and the number of cavalrymen or the savar they were required to maintain for the state. Okay, and also remember, salaries were basically paid through land assignments called jagirs. Fantastic. Now let's try to understand the economy, the lifeblood. Okay, now the lifeblood of Mughal Empire was agriculture. Now fertile plains produced abundant food grains like, say, wheat, rice, millets, alongside major cash crops. They also had cash crops like, say, cotton, which fueled a massive textile industry. Textile industry was very huge during that period. Then indigo. Indigo was a prized dye which was used for export during that time. then sugarcane and opium. These were cash products for them. Okay, and the state basically played a keen interest in maximizing agricultural output. During Mughal Empire, the state itself, the empire itself, played a keen interest in maximizing agricultural output. Now, several land revenue systems were basically employed during that day. Okay, how the land revenue system worked. Some of them which we know are famous among them was this one, Zapti, Todarmal's Zapti system, which was under Akbar. Now, this basically Zapti system involved careful measurement of land and assessment based on crop yields over 10 years. Okay, this was the only system. Zapti system was only fair system, if we call it like that. Okay, it involved, they used to carefully measure the land and assess the crop yield of next 10 years. Based on that, they used to charge revenue. Okay, that it was called Zapti. This was under Akbar. Then other systems like Nasak was there. Nasak was estimation, based on just estimated. And Kankut was basically sharing. Kankut basically only sharing. Whatever land revenue the farmer got, sharing was happening. These also existed. Okay, the state also provided Takavi. Takavi is loans to peasants. Okay, peasants and merchants. Takavi was, the state provided Takavi to merchants in time of need. Okay, whenever they needed, the state provided the loans. It was called Takavi. And they also invested, the state also invested in irrigation, primary to wells and tanks. At that time, okay, for irrigation, the state developed and invested into wells and tanks. Okay, some canals were built, like those by, I think Shahjahan. Yeah, during Shahjahan, certain canals were also built. Okay, which were very important during monsoons. Okay, and during that time, the Persian wheel, or the Rahat, it was also called Rahat, the wheel which they used to lift water from the well. It was a common scene during that time. Okay, these were the backbone of the economy, and this is how economy used to run during Mughal period. Okay, now let's also understand, if innovation or technology was developed during Mughal period. Now, predominantly Mughal period was agrarian. Agrarian matlab, they were based on agriculture. Like even India was a major source of revenue for India was agriculture for a long period. Similarly, Mughal period, agriculture was their main source of income. But they also saw significant technological developments. Okay, where particularly in military hardware, in military technology, they basically mastered the use of gunpowder. They also fielded heavy siege cannons. Okay, heavy cannons they made. They also invested and made lighter field artillery. Okay, and metallurgy skills were very crucial for this. So at that time, metallurgy technology was used. Okay, but most impactful globally during that time was textile technology. Okay, now techniques were used for spinning fine thread, weaving intricate patterns, like if you understand textile arts. Okay, there were arts like Jamdani muslin, which was from Dhaka, or brocades from Varanasi. Okay, weaving intricate patterns was one of the major things which the Mughal artisans used to do. Okay, and they also did sophisticated dyeing methods to produce unmatched textiles anywhere in the world. Okay, during Mughal period, the textile technology was highly developed. That is the reason the textile exports was the major export during Mughal period. You have to understand this. Huge exports of textile was done during that time. Now shipbuilding was also flourished in centers like Surat and Bengal. They were supporting maritime trade. Okay, apart from that they had that water management system was there, construction techniques were used. Okay, all these things were used and developed during Mughal period. Okay, now let's also try to understand the trade, how it flourished. Okay, trade, of course, certainly trade flourished during that period, especially if you look at the internal trade. uh, they moved goods along relatively secure routes. They had secure routes at that time with sarais for travelers. Sarais matlab the way we have dhabas now for travelers. Okay, these days we have dhabas every place, but during that time they used to have sarais for travelers, and also used waterways to move goods along different locations. Now, major cities like Agra, Delhi, Lahore, Patna, and Dhaka, they were basically commercial hubs. They were basically bustling commercial hubs. Okay, external trade was even more lucrative. It was more lucrative, more, there were more profits in external trade as well. Now overland caravans, they used to trek, caravans used to trek to Persia and Central Asia. They also used to trade textiles. Okay, all these they used to trade for what? For horses and luxury goods. They used to import horses and luxury goods. Okay, okay, for these things, for what things? For textiles, and a lot of other stuffs which Mughal artisans used to make. Now maritime trade was also huge, and it was happening from ports like the Surat. The Surat port was called the gateway to Mecca. Okay, remember this. Okay, you might get this in an MCQ. The Surat port was called the gateway to Mecca. Okay, there were also different ports like Cambe, Hooghly, Maslipatnam. Okay, these were the ports during that time, and ships carried different products like spices, textiles, indigo, then saltpeter, everything to Red Sea. From Red Sea, they also traveled to Persian Gulf, then also to Southeast Asia, and increasingly to Europe. What happened is during Mughal period, these products even went till Europe. Okay, and in return, no, India primarily received vast amount of gold as well as silver. Okay, apart from horses and luxury goods which they were importing, in return, okay, for these goods, India used to receive vast amount of gold and silver bullions. That is how it was a favorable balance of trade for us during Mughal period. Okay, now let's try to understand. Okay, let's also try to understand how basically they used to do trade. Now this trades were facilitated by different mercantile communities. Let's speak something about the communities. Okay, the mercantile communities, the merchant communities were called, they were there, Baniyas were there, Boras were there, Khatris were there, Chettis were there. Okay, now apart from these mercantile communities, there were also a network of bankers who were called Sarafs. Sarafs were bankers. They used to manage money. They money changers and bankers. They were called Sarafs. Now they handled money changings, loans, and insurance as well during Mughal period. Okay, and at that time, a key instrument which was used was Hundi. Hundi. You people understand what Hundi is? Even these days, Hundi work. Yes, Hundi is basically a bill of exchange. Okay, it's like, you carry just one bill of exchange. If you need money, say I'm in Hyderabad, if I have to pay some money to you in Surat, say 5 crore, 10 crore rupees. Okay, Hundi system is used. We get a paper or a small note here, we give it to the person there, I will get the money there. That is Hundi. Okay, that is also bill of exchange. I have to just give a bill there, I'll get the money there. Okay, now this Hundi This is a bill of exchange. It allowed the merchants to transfer large sums securely across different distances. Okay, they didn't have to carry coins physically, the gold or anything, they didn't have to carry physically. Okay, the Hindi system basically was very secure. You only have to give a chit or something, these days. I think, I am not sure, but a lot of news comes on, they use a note, half note. Half note is kept with the person, half note is given to you, you provide the half note there in the other city, you get your money. That is how Hundi works. Okay, so during Mughal period, Hundi was there. Okay, and the standard Mughal currency at that time was gold mohars, gold mohars, sone ke sikke, gold mohars. Then a silver rupaya was there. Okay, for it is basically the precursor to our modern rupee. Silver rupaya was there, and copper dams were also there. They also aided commerce. Okay, so this is about commerce. Now let's try to understand about the dazzling culture of the Mughal era, particularly from 1526 to 1761. Mughal era was between 1526 to 1761. Architecture. Architecture basically saw a magnificent synthesis of Persian, Central Asian and Indian traditions. These are basically a mixture of all this stuff. Okay, and early structures under Babur and Humayun, okay, gave way to Akbar's grand experiments at Fatehpur Sikri. Okay, Akbar basically experimented on Fatehpur Sikri. It was built largely on red sandstone. Then Humayun's tomb in Delhi, it also perfected the Charbagh garden layout and foreshadowed the Taj. Okay, then Jahangir, he basically favored gardens. Jahangir used to focus on painting gardens and all that stuff. Okay, now he saw the exquisite marble tomb of Imtimadud-Dawla. Okay, they also featured delicate Pietra Dura inlay work. Okay, then Shah Jahan's rule marked the zenith. During Shah Jahan, architecture was at the zenith. Zenith means at the peak, at the top of the model. Okay, the ethereal, the Taj Mahal. You know about the Taj Mahal, the architecture of Taj Mahal is still called the seventh wonder of the world. Then the majestic Red Fort and Jama Masjid in Delhi, okay, showcasing white marble, intricate carvings were there. They were made in white marbles, very delicate and intricate carvings were made, perfect symmetry was made, and opulent decoration was made during Shah Jahan's time. Even Aurangzeb basically was very less extravagant. He never used to spend a lot on these things, art and architecture. But still, notable structures like the Badshahi Mosque in Lahore, the Bibi Ka Maqbara, they were made during Aurangzeb. Okay, now let's basically try to understand the literature during Mughal period. Literature thrived under imperial patronage. Under Mughal Empire, literature thrived. Now, Persian was the language of court and administration. In Persians, historical masterpieces were made, like the Akbarnama. Akbarnama was a poetry by Faizi and Urfi. It is written in Persian. Then also there were translations. Mahabharata translation was made into Persian, which is called, I think, Razmnama. Razmnama is Mahabharata's translation in Persian. Then there was also a translation of Upanishad, okay, which is called Sri Akbar. During Akbar's period, he also got Upanishads translated in Persian, which is called Sri Akbar. Okay, now apart from Persian, Yeah, some other vernacular languages were also flourished. Vernacular languages means languages which were spoken. They also flourished. This was also a great era of for Hindi Bhakt, the great Bhakti poets like Surdas, okay, Tulsidas, okay, you understand Surdas and Tulsidas. Ramcharitmanas is the very famous one. Okay, this was the immensely popular Ramayana, Ramcharitmanas, immense popular book for the Hindi speaking regions. Okay, these were written during that period. Now figures like Abdur Rahim Khan, they wrote poetry in Hindi and Hindavi. Okay, so Hindi and Hindavi were also flourishing during Mughal period. Now apart from Persian and Hindi and Hindavi, Urdu also started to evolve. It began evolving as a distinct literary language. Okay, especially in Deccan, like in the South India, in Deccan, and in the later Mughal court. Okay, Urdu started to become and evolve as a literary language. Okay, now regional languages like Bengali, Marathi also started to grow in literature wise during Mughal period. Okay, so languages, literature, it thrived under Mughal Empire. Okay, now let's also try to understand the education, how the centers of learning were started, okay, and they were working. Now education was primarily centered around religious institutions. You have to understand, education during Mughal period was only given to a certain class of people, only for elite people. Ordinary people doesn't used to get education. For ordinary people, okay, most of the work was happening through, what I can say, uh, internship sort of thing. Okay, but education was only happening for the elite people. Okay, now what was the type of education, how were the institutions formed there? Okay, during that time they were centered, education was centered only around religious institutions. Maktab was there. Maktab often attached to mosque, it was attached to mosques like what we have madrasas today. There were maktas. Now maktas, they provided elementary education. Elementary education means reading, writing, arithmetic and the Quran. These were taught in maktab, the elementary education, sorry. Okay, then after maktab there were also madrasas. Now madrasas used to provide higher learning, but where, in which parts? Higher learning in the Islamic theology, law, then logic, the philosophy, the literature, mathematics, astronomy, and also Unani medicine. All these were provided by madrasas during Mughal period. Okay, now also during this period, okay, emperors and nobles patronized institutes and maintained libraries for these institutes, for different madrasas. These nobles, the emperors and these nobles, the main people, they basically used to maintain libraries, and these libraries were called kitab khana. Okay, these were called kitab khanas. The way we have libraries now, they used to maintain libraries which was called kitab khanas. And education during that period remained largely traditional and focused on the elite. Okay, they were not for common men. Now for common men, practical skills were often learned through apprenticeship, internship, not apprenticeship. Okay, like what we see today, for a shop, if you have to do some learn some practical skill, we go there and we learn. Okay, so during those things, for common men, practical skills were often taught. Okay, now let's actually try to understand the fine arts, the expression of culture, paintings and music. Okay, the fine arts, especially painting and music, it also reached incredible heights during Mughal period. Now, Mughals miniature painting initially was influenced by Persian styles, but it also developed a unique, vibrant character in the imperial workshops, in the karkhanas. Okay, initially it was influenced by Persian style, but later on it developed a unique style. Okay, in karkhanas. Okay, and under Akbar, paintings were dynamic. He used to ask painters to make dynamic paintings illustrating manuscripts and historical events. So during Akbar, okay, historical events were made as an art. Artists like Dasavant and Basavant, they used to make historical paintings. Then Jahangir was also a keen connoisseur. He favored naturalism. Okay, he liked artists to draw, depictions of birds, animals, flowers. Okay, so artists like Ustad Mansoor, their portraits, their arts were very very realistic. Okay, he also liked portraits by Bishandas. Bishandas was one artist during Jahangir. They were very popular. Majorly, their arts were depictions of birds, animals, and nature, realistic one. Then Shah Jahan's era saw more formal, opulent court scenes and portraits. During Shah Jahan, the artists used to make court scenes, okay, portraits that were made during Shah Jahan. Aurangzeb basically discouraged painting. He didn't like much. Okay, but still painting continued in regional center. You understand this? Aurangzeb generally, he used to avoid the extravagant things. Architecture he didn't used to like, the paintings and music he didn't used to like. But still, he was never against it, but he didn't do much like these guys did. Akbar, Babur, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, all these guys, they made certain things. Aurangzeb, no, he was not that extravaganza. Okay, now let's try to understand about music. Okay, now music flourished, particularly our Hindustani classical music. It flourished during Mughal Empire. Okay, Akbar's court basically had legendary musicians like Tansen. We all heard about Tansen. Okay, and Tansen is credited with developing many ragas. Tansen actually developed many of the ragas. And also during that time, Drupad style, Khayal style, all these basically developed during Mughal period. Okay, Khayal gained prominence later during Mughal period. Later on, after not during Akbar, but later on the Khayal form. Okay, it gained prominence later on. Aurangzeb again here he discouraged court music. All these kings, the emperors. Okay. Akbar, Shah Jahan, all these emperors, they also used to listen to music in their court. Court means in their palace. Okay, while the meetings happened, like we had this Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha, during that time it was called court. In English, we called it court. Court is basically a palace, a meeting palace for the kings, where a lot of ministers come, a lot of people come, they discuss lot of things. So even in these courts during that time, except Aurangzeb, all the emperors, they basically had and listened to music. So music was also thriving during Mughals period. Okay, right. Let's try to understand the Mughal society. How the Mughal society was. What was Mughal society actually like? It was highly stratified. Okay, at the top were the ulema. Ulema, even today we know ulemas. Ulema is an Islamic scholar who basically interpreted religious law. Religious law is Sharia according to Islamic culture. Religious law is Sharia. Okay, now ulema used to interpret religious law, and he used to hold judicial posts like the qazis. Ulemas used to hold judicial posts like the qazis and also advised the rulers on religious matters. Now he also has significant influence, especially under orthodox rulers like Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was orthodox ruler. He didn't used to support Hindus a lot, other castes, not only Hindus. He was orthodox. So he was, these days we call Kattarpanthi. In Hindi we call Kattarpanthi. Kattarpanthi Hindu hai, Kattarpanthi Muslim hai, ठीक है, Kattarpanthi Christian hai. So what they do is they only follow these. That's it. For example, if I am in Kattarpanthi Islam, okay, I will reject Hinduism, I will reject Christianity, I will reject all other religions. Okay, if I am Kattar Hindu, I will reject all other religions. If I am Kattarpanthi Christian, I reject all other religions. So Aurangzeb was an orthodox ruler. Orthodox means Kattarpanthi. So he used to reject all other religions. Okay, so during Aurangzeb period, these ulemas had significant influence. Okay, sometimes with rulers like say Akbar. Akbar was not Kattarpanthi. Akbar was, he used to take care of all religions. He was not against it. Akbar was not against Hinduism or Christianity or any other religion. Okay, so ulemas used to actually clash with rulers during that period, because ulemas are orthodox. They only try to understand their law. That's it. Ulema will not read the other religions or the other laws that importantly, okay, or that delicately. They have more knowledge only of Islamic law, but very less knowledge or no knowledge at all about other laws. And they basically, when they come, they only used to follow the Islamic laws, ulema. Okay, so during the time of Akbar's, ulemas used to have clashes and fights and arguments. A lot of arguments used to happen during the time of Akbar. But during the time of Aurangzeb, they had significant influence. Okay, now the nobility. Now Amirs, they were the ruling class. Amirs were the ruling class. Now a diverse group, which included Turanis. Turanis were basically from Central Asia. Iranis were from Persia. Then Afghans, Indian Muslims were called Sheikhjadas, and also incorporated during that time in Amirs. They also incorporated Hindu groups like the Rajputs and the Marathas. Okay, and these Amirs basically held high mansabs. What does mansab means? Ranks. Remember the Mansabdar system? Okay. Now these these nobility members, the Amirs, they held high mansabs, high ranks. They controlled administration and the military. Okay, and they used to live lavishly. Okay, they were often patrons of culture because they live lavishly. The paintings, the musics and all, they used to follow those things. Okay, however, between different amirs, between different nobles, there were a lot of clashes because of factionalism as well. Okay, it used to happen there during that time. This also played a crucial role for Mughals' decline. Okay, now below the nobility were the jamindars. Now jamindars were the crucial intermediates. They were intermediaries, mostly hereditary landlords who had right over specific territories, like the Raja, small Rajas. Okay, small kingdoms. Those were called jamindars. Now they used to have rights over specific territories, mostly because of hereditary, because their fathers, forefathers, they used to hold that land. So continuously they were holding. So zamindari system was there, and their primary role, zamindar's role, was to collect revenue. Okay, to collect zamindar's basically role was to collect revenue from peasants for the state. They received the revenue. They also shared this revenue with the central ministry, with the central empire. Okay, they used to receive a share from this revenue. They also maintained local law and order, and used to provide troops when needed. Whenever troops were needed, these zamindars used to provide it. Now, zamindars used to have various level of power. Varying level of powers were there. Some were, autonomous chieftains. During that time, some zamindaris used to have, I am the only king. Okay, he never used to have chieftains, or below him he never used to have something. In other zamindari systems, some people used to have small intermediaries as well. Below zamindaris, they used to have often some other small people. Okay, often they also had forts and armed retainers. Okay, they used to have that. And their relationship, Jamindar's relationship with the state was in different periods and during different Jamindars, it was either cooperative or conflictual. Cooperative means some people, some Zamindars were all okay, they always agreed to the state. But some Zamindars, the powerful, the more money they start to, more revenue they start to get, they started conflicting and trying to become more powerful than the state. Okay. Now, so this was, Zamindari was the crucial link between the state and the peasantry. Okay. Now, the peasantry. Peasantry are basically the merchants. Okay. Merchants or the farmers at that time. Now, vast majority of the population were peasantries. Okay. They were cultivators. And there were two type of cultivators during that time. Okay. One is who owned the land. It was called khudkasta, own cultivators, owner cultivator. They used to own the land and they used to cultivate the land. They were called khudkasta. And then pahikasta, who did not used to own the land, but they used to take the land on rent or lease and they used to cultivate. So they were called pahikasta. Now, major of the land revenue, okay, was basically collected from these khudkasta and pahikasta, because they were cultivators, because they were peasantry. Okay, so they were also vulnerable to famines and exploitation. Famines is basically natural, exploitation because land revenues were high at a lot of times. Okay, and state doesn't used to support them. And village community structure also provided some support during that time for the peasantry. Okay. Now, apart from peasantry, there were artisans. After the farmers, there were artisans. Artisans means people who are skilled workers, like the weavers, the blacksmiths, the goldsmiths, carpenters, potters. Lot of them were there. And many of these artisans were also working in karkhanas. Now, these imperial royal people, they used to have karkhanas in their own kingdom. So these artisans used to work in karkhanas as well. They were organized along caste lines. Okay, we'll discuss about the caste as well. Okay, and these artisans, they lived in different villages and towns as well, depending on the requirement. Okay, on the work, these workers, the blacksmiths, the carpenters, potters, okay, they used to live either in village or in town. They produced goods basically for local consumption as well as for trade. Okay, these artisans, because the artwork during Mughal Empire was also very good. So the works of these artisans were also used to be exported to other countries. Okay, and some of these artisans, as I said, they used to work in imperial karkhanas. Okay, these were artisans. Now, after artisans, there were also slaves. Okay, but slaves during Mughal period, slaves basically declined. They were not slaves in the literary terms. Okay, slavery basically at that time was existed, but what we call slavery is war captives, or if you own a lot of debt. Okay, or by birth. For example, if if a person A was a domestic helper, his son will also become a domestic helper in that family. Okay, even today you see that happening in a lot of family people. Okay, our domestic helper's son or daughter will become a domestic helper. Okay, that is also a type of slavery. We should also avoid it, but during that time these were there. war captives, they were used for slaves as slaves. Then debt bondage, obviously you know what debt bondage is. Okay, if I take a money, if some person took debt of something, okay, some money, and he was unable to pay that debt, they used to keep him as a slave. As a slave means he didn't used to do some very slavery work, but whatever work was there, they used to get it done. Okay, and slaves basically were used for domestic services, which we do even today. For domestic services, a lot of laborers, today we call them laborers. This is my opinion. Okay, today what were laborers, what we call is the only thing is they didn't get the opportunity. Okay, domestic service. Now slaves during that time were used for domestic service, for military purposes as well, and even for crafts, for the minor small jobs, for doing artworks and all that stuff. During crafts, slaves were used. Okay, they were not on the scale of plantation slavery. It means that slaves were not very huge at that point of time, but slaves also used to get opportunities. Some slaves could also rise to higher positions. It used to happen at that time. A lot of slaves, basically from slaves, they come to a higher position. And slavery declined over time. During Mughal period, slavery declined over time. Okay, now let's come to the status of women. How they treated women. Okay, now their status, the status of women basically varied significantly depending on class, their religion and region. Which class they belong, elite class or common women. Okay, which religion they belong either to Muslim or any other religion, which region they belong. Based on that, the status of women was defined, not decided, but it was defined. Now elite women, educated women, for example, like say Noor Jahan was educated, Jahanara was educated, they had some political influence. These educated women had some political influence. They also used to own property, of course subject to parda. Okay, parda is basically the Islamic Sharia law. They had their law there. Okay, so these elite women, they also owned property but subject to parda. Then common women, yes, they used to work in different sectors, different fields alongside men. Common women used to work in arts, in crafts, in agriculture. Alongside women, they used to work in that. Okay, but yes, common women faced social restrictions during Mughal period. They used to face a lot of social restriction during that period. Now apart from that, practices like sati. You know what sati is? Okay, for people who don't understand, sati is, for example, if a woman becomes widowed, okay, during that time, sati was a practice where if a husband dies, woman during her burial time or during her ritual, death ritual, she has to also die along with the husband. Okay, if in certain regions, if the dead body is placed on fire along with the husband, the woman was also placed on fire. If the husband was say buried somewhere, in some regions they used to do it, the wife was also buried. Okay, the same time. Okay, that was sati, that was a practice. Now practice of sati, child marriage, they were prevalent during Mughal period. Okay, though rulers like Akbar, he opposed these things. Now Akbar was very open minded. So some rulers like Akbar, they opposed it, but other rulers didn't actually. They neither opposed, they were neither against it, nor they were in favor of it. It was like community culture, so it was followed on. Dowry system also existed during that period. Okay, now how did this rule, this Mughal Empire, such a vast empire, had cracks started to fall? Okay, basically there were two reasons, internal reasons and external reasons. Okay, first let's actually try to understand what were the internal reasons. The internal reasons were post Aurangzeb, after Aurangzeb, rulers were generally inefficient. They were not as efficient as the last emperor Aurangzeb was. Aurangzeb is considered to be the last emperor. Most of the people, they even today, commonly if you ask them who was the last emperor, they call Aurangzeb. But no, Aurangzeb was not the last emperor. There were many other emperors after them also. Some emperors came. But but after Aurangzeb, no other emperor was efficient enough. They lacked authority. Okay. And after Aurangzeb, what happened was, now Aurangzeb basically was very orthodox. So after Aurangzeb, wars of succession, okay, because he had probably 2 3 wives, or then the kids started fighting for this empire. Wars of succession that destabilized the empire. So weak successors, number one. Second, Aurangzeb's policies. Now, because of Aurangzeb's policies, his treasure was drained. Okay. Now, Deccan wars, most of the wars, they drained the resources. Religious policies, what Aurangzeb had. Okay. They alienated the Rajputs and Marathas. During Aurangzeb period, Rajput and Marathas were not considered to be a part of Mughal Empire. Now, during Akbar and Babur and Shah Jahan, what happened was they were also considered. They were also on talking terms. They were, a lot of policies were going on. But during Aurangzeb, they alienated Rajput and Marathas. Now, this increased peasant revolts. Now, peasants, most of the peasants were Jats, Sikhs, okay, Sattamis. They revolted back. That also, okay, that also was a cause for decline of Mughal Empire. Degeneration of nobility. Now, nobility, Amirs, what happened? Okay, as I said, during nobility, factionalism, okay, corruption, it all weakened the administration. Okay, Jagirdari crisis started. Jagirdari crisis means land revenue from different parts. They used to get different land revenue. Okay, now the land revenue started to decrease because Jagirs were decreasing and they were also revolting. So Jagirdari land revenue was not coming at that time. So Jagirdari crisis was also a part of decline of Mughal. Then military weakness. Now this was the major thing as well. They were not updating technologically. They were not updating discipline wise. They were not updating their military system and the Mansabdari system, the rank system. After some time, obviously rank system works for some purpose, till some stage, but after some stage, okay, it becomes flawed. Okay, errors start coming, the mistakes start coming. So the Mansabdari system flaws started to come up. It became apparent. So that also was an internal cause of decline. Then the economic crisis. Obviously, during Aurangzeb or even before that, there was over taxation. Okay, whoever used to pay tax, from them they used to take more and more. Okay, the Jagirdari crisis, it basically started to revolt. Okay, disruption of trade started to happen because a lot of artisans stopped working, salaries were not paid at time. Okay, because land revenue was not coming, so salaries were not paid at time. So a lot of revolt has started to happen. So economic crisis started. So that was also a reason for decline. Now let's look at the external causes. Okay, the external causes. Now foreign invasion started. The major thing was foreign invasion. Now Nadir Shah in 1739, he basically sacked the Delhi in 1739. Then there were major invasions, multiple invasions. Battle of Panipat was there. Third Battle of Panipat, 1761. This basically exposed the weakness of Mughal Empire, and during this war, a lot of wealth was used. They were already in economic crisis. During that, because of the war, the wealth was lost, of the wealth was used, and they became more weak. Okay, and then simultaneously the rise of regional power. Okay, regional powers started becoming more powerful, like the Marathas. Marathas started to become a dominant power. The Sikhs in the Punjab, they started to establish their own kingdom. The Jats around Bharatpur, they started their own kingdom as well. Okay, then again the independent states like the Nizam of Hyderabad, the Awadh, the Bengal, they started to take autonomy. Okay, so all these were basically also the external factors of decline. Now the major factor happened during the arrival of European power. Okay, initially the Europes, the East India Company, because during Mughal period trade was going till Europe. Okay, products of India were going till Europe. So a lot of Britishers, they understood there is a lot of money here, lot of artisans here, they can basically take care of that. So British East India Company, initially they came in India for trade. Okay, and during these Mughals time, these traders became rulers. The East India Company, British East India Company, they gradually started to influence and take the political and military influence they started, and they exploited the Mughal decline. Okay, especially the Battle of Plassey, which was in 1757, and the Battle of Buxar. Okay, these has to be noted, these has to be remembered. The Battle of Plassey 1757 and the Battle of Buxar 1764. Okay, now these were the two major battles which actually were a factor for decline of Mughals. Okay, now you understand all this, the legacy. Okay, the legacy of Mughals. Now the administration, we worked on the administration, we spoke about the culture, the economy. Okay, we also talked about the decline, the factors about the decline of Mughals, and why the Marathas and other regional powers came to power or rised in power. Okay, the major reason, the only reason Marathas and the regional powers like Nizams and all the stuff, they started to have the power because the main state, the establishment, main state were unable to take care of a lot of problems, lot of things. Okay, now this also paved way to the British colonial dominance. Okay, try to understand this. This paved to the way for British colonial dominance. Okay, now even today we see a lot of influence on India in Indian culture, architecture and administration. We see this in our society even today. This is all of Mughal era. Okay, now that's it about Mughal Empire and also the sources. Especially for Andhra University distance education people, this completes the unit 1 of history and culture of India from 1526 to 1950. Okay, I hope you liked the video. Okay, I hope you understand and I was helpful in explaining certain things to you. If you like the video, please click on the like button, subscribe for more videos. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.